In today's video, I want to share with you my top 5 beginner-friendly plants for your aquarium and why I think they're perfect. Before we get started though, if you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. Now there are way more than 5 beginner-friendly plants in this hobby. But if I did a video with every single one of those included, we'd be here for hours. And you and I both don't have that kind of time, so I'm just gonna keep it to my top 5. And if you wanna see more, let me know down in the comments and maybe I'll make a part 2 to this video. So the first plant on the list is the Anubis Petite. I waited a while in my aquascaping journey to try this plant, and honestly it haunts me to this day. I currently have Anubis Petite in 3 of my 7 tanks now because it's arguably one of my favorite plants in the hobby. And it's super easy to care for, and I recommend it for any beginner. I love Anubis Petite so much, and it's super easy to care for. I've got it growing both in high-tech and low-tech systems, and I've even got it growing immersed in a pondscape. This plant is basically indestructible and is super beginner friendly. Petite is an epiphyte, which means it's incredibly easy to plant. Simply wedge it into any crack or crevice in your hardscape, and the roots will naturally attach the plant to that bit of hardscape on its own. You can also attach Petite to hardscape by tying it with string or using a gel type super glue and sticking it on with that. But as I've said in previous videos, I personally like to wedge it into the cracks naturally and let the plant attach itself. If you read up on this plant, you'll see that it likes low to medium light. And that's because it's a slow growing epiphyte. So if you have high light, you're gonna have a higher chance of algae getting on those leaves. Now, if you do have high light on your tank, you can still put this plant inside. Just make sure you have a good algae cleaning crew who will stay after those leaves and make sure they're nice and clean in your aquarium. I think one of the cooler things about Anubis Petite is because of its small size, you can place it pretty much anywhere in your aquarium and it won't ruin the scale of your aquascape. So that's it for plant number 1, Anubis Petite. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend you give it a shot and let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Now let's get on to plant number 2. Another beginner-friendly plant that I absolutely love is a stem plant, and that's Lgia Super Red. Lgia Super Red is one of the few red plants in this hobby that grows well both in high-tech and low-tech systems. The key to keeping this plant happy and healthy is 2 things. 1, being quality light, and 2, being quality aqua soil. If you pair these 2 things together, even in a low-tech system, you're gonna have great results with this stem plant. And if you have a high-tech system, you're gonna have even better results with this stem plant. When healthy, this plant is an absolutely stunning red color and will instantly add a pop to any tank you put it in. This plant is classified as a fast-growing stem plant. So if you keep it trimmed often and have it in the right conditions, it won't be long before you have Lgia Super Red coming out of your ears. Trimming this plant is super easy. All you gotta do is grab a pair of aquascaping scissors and cut the stem right at the node between the 2 leaves. Once you cut the stem, just take what you've trimmed off and replant it in the soil, and within a few weeks, it'll have grown its own roots and started a new plant. The leaves to Lgia Super Red have a super cool texture and shape to them, and if you're injecting CO2 in your system, you'll start to see oxygen bubbles collecting on the leaves, which is a super cool thing to see. Now this plant naturally is super red, literally hence its name. But if you want to get it even redder, you can go with a lean fertilizer dosing schedule. And if you do this, then you'll get the coloration to be even redder and brighter, but that's not something you have to do in order to get the red coloration out of this plant. Now for plant number 3, and that's Bulbus. Now there are a couple different types of Bulbus within the aquascaping hobby, but honestly, they all grow and act about the same, so we're just covering it as one general type, and that's just Bulbus. Now Bulbus is an epiphyte plant that has a very fern-like texture and shape to its leaves. If you have this plant, it'll create an instant impact in any aquascape you put it in. Just like plant number 1 and 2, it can be grown both in high-tech systems and low-tech systems and not have any issues. I've grown Bulbus in both high-tech and low-tech systems and had stunning results both times. I even have a form of Bulbus growing immersed in my paludarium. It's a super versatile plant and very difficult to kill. Now, like I said, this is an epiphyte plant, so in order for it to thrive, you need to attach it to your hardscape. You can do this just like the Anubis Nanop Petite, where you wedge it into cracks and crevices, or you can tie it, or you can glue it. It's an epiphyte, so as long as it's not planted in the soil, it should do fine. Bulbus tends to grow on the slower side, but if kept in the right conditions, can quickly take over any tank and grow super fast. To trim Bulbus, simply break off a piece of the rhizome and then replant it in the same manner you did originally, by wedging it into a crack or crevice, or tying it or gluing it. Either way, as long as it's attached to hardscape, it'll do just fine. Now, Bulbus can be a little expensive to purchase, but in my experience, it's worth it. I've had Bulbus in my tanks for years, and I even received a gift of Bulbus from a friend down in Southern California who bought it from another person who had had it for 5 years. So I had a 6-year-old plant of Bulbus that was thriving and doing absolutely fabulous. If kept in the right conditions, this plant can last for a long time, grow beautifully, and make a huge impact on your aquascape. All right, we're almost there. We're now on to plant number 4. Number 4 on my list of beginner-friendly plants is Sagittarius Subulata. Sagittarius Subulata is an absolute beast of an aquarium plant. I've literally got it growing in a low-tech system in straight cosmetic sand with only light and a very lean liquid fertilizer dosage, and it's thriving. Sagittarius Subulata is a fast-growing mid-ground plant that spreads via runners, similar to a carpeting plant. If left to itself, you can quickly have a carpet out of this plant because it grows so quickly and spreads so rapidly. If you don't trim this plant often and let it go on its own, the leaves will get super long and they'll either bend over towards the substrate, creating an arch, or if you have high light, they'll keep growing super long and eventually go all the way to the surface of your tank. This plant is one of those plants that I would classify as indestructible. Like I said earlier, I've literally got it growing in straight cosmetic sand and it's absolutely thriving. This plant has a very gnarly root system and grows roots very quickly. So if you have it in good quality aqua soil, this plant is going to explode in growth and absolutely thrive. So whether you're a beginner or a pro, if you haven't tried Sagittarius Subulata, I highly recommend you give it a shot and let me know what you think of it. And finally, number 5 on my list of beginner-friendly plants is Christmas moss. If there is any plant in the aquascaping hobby that classifies itself as indestructible, it would be Christmas moss. I've had this stuff grow immersed, submerged, low-tech, high-tech. I've even placed it in a bag and put it on my windowsill for 2 months, and it still was healthy and growing inside the Ziploc bag. The moss itself has a really cool texture to it, and just like any scape, adding moss will instantly give an aged and natural look to your aquascape. Another bonus to Christmas moss is that it's pretty cheap to buy. You can find it almost anywhere, and if you can't find it in a store or at an online retailer, chances are any of your local hobbyists will have some because it's super common and you can get it in big portions when you do buy it online. To propagate Christmas moss, it's super simple. Just literally grab a chunk, rip it off, and place it wherever you're going to place it next. I believe boostplant.com describes it as cut, rip, and chew as propagation style. You can literally just rip this stuff off and place it anywhere and it will start growing within a couple of days. Now again, with Christmas moss, you don't need anything in particular for it to grow. Like I said, I literally stuck it in a Ziploc bag and it grew on my windowsill for 2 months with no issues. One thing I should note when you're planting is not to lay the moss on too thick. If you put big chunks on your hardscape, the parts of the moss that aren't exposed to the light are going to die off and melt, and that can cause some serious algae issues in your tank, as well as just look ugly. So make sure that when you're planting, you place a very thin layer on the hardscape and let it fill out on its own. So those are my top 5 beginner-friendly aquarium plants to keep. As I mentioned before, there's a ton more. So if you want to see another video like this, let me know down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.